All right, thank you guys. My name is Alex, and I'm one of many pastors here. What do I mean when I say that every week? I mean, look around. These adults, these leaders of your groups, all these folks up here, they want to follow Jesus and invite you to follow them as they follow Jesus and love you well while they do it. One of the things that I like about having a lot of pastors in the room is I don't have to always be the one to speak. And what I mean by that is it's not a burden to do it, but it means that you guys get to hear the voices of people who are also being touched by Jesus besides me. And you guys get the benefit of hearing how the way that Jesus writes his story on their lives just as much. So I get to introduce to you one of my very good friends. He is a pastor. He serves alongside Mary, myself, and others that you might know at a ministry called Kairos across town. It is primarily college and young adult students, but I know a lot of you guys, especially high schoolers, may find yourselves there on a Sunday night. So let me tell you a little bit about Cameron. Cameron is from Orlando, Florida, and he still believes that the University of Central Florida won the 2017 national championship, and that's just not true. It was, roll tide, University of Alabama. He is from a big Italian family, and he loves to cook, and he loves to do it because his grandfather taught him it is the quickest way to take a friend and turn them into family, and I love that answer. And I asked him, what is the definition of a successful life? What is your definition of success? And he said it was to authentically, intentionally pursue Christ and make disciples while I do it. So would you please bring a warm welcome. Welcome home, Cameron. Come on.
Oh. Thanks, man. Thanks, Alex. Hey, guys. Good to see y'all. Again, my name is Cameron. Was with y'all a few months ago, and I'm thankful that Alex has, again, brought me back here. I just want to talk with you guys a little bit tonight as you guys are continuing your series on Manifest. Again, excited to be here. Thankful that Alex would bring me back. You guys have such a great pastor that wants you, one, to be in community, but also to grow in your faith. He's passionate about both of those things, so you guys are very, very lucky to have him. But as we kind of open our Bibles tonight to Luke chapter 15, we're going to kind of read through real quick the story of the prodigal son. You guys might have heard of this story before. It's pretty famous in the scriptures. But essentially, to set it up, what we're doing is looking in at Jesus after he's been kind of accosted a little bit by some Pharisees, some religious leaders of the day. And what he's doing is he's kind of answering the question of, why do you sit with sinners? Why are you here in the midst of people who are deemed dirty or broken? Why are you the one that's sitting with these people that probably don't really need to be sat with by the religious people? It's going to stain your reputation. So he gives a couple stories here, but what I think is really great is this third story called the parable of the lost son. So if you have a Bible with you, go ahead and open that up to Luke chapter 15. We're going to start in verse 11, but real quick, I would just love to pray for us before we start. Father, thank you for the many blessings that you give us. One of which is the community that we're in right now, the family that we have to grow with you and grow in you. Father, thank you for your son and the work that he did years and years ago to show us your love, to show us a love that we cannot understand, a love that we cannot comprehend, but a love that is tangible, that we can understand enough to grasp a hold of and to imitate and reflect and manifest in our lives. Father, tonight, I pray that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear, and you would speak clearly to us in your word. All this we pray in your name. Amen. All right, so Luke chapter 15, we're going to read quite a few verses, all the way to verse 32. But what we're going to do is kind of take this step by step a little bit and read as we go, right? Starting in verse 11, he's telling a story, and he says this. A man had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming to me." So he distributed the assets to them. Not many days later, the son had gathered everything that he had together, and he traveled to a distant country where he squandered his estate in foolish living. Afterwards, he said, after he had spent everything, a famine struck the country, and he had nothing. Then he went to work for one of the citizens of the country who sent him into the field to feed his pigs. He longed to eat from the pods that the pigs were eating from, for he was hungry, but no one would give him anything to eat. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food, and here I am dying of hunger? I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers." So he got up after saying this and went to see his father. But while the son was still a ways off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. The son said to the father, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father told his servants, "Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine was dead, but now he is alive again. He was lost, but now is found." So they began to celebrate. And now the older son was in the fields. And as he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he summoned one of the servants and questioned him. And the servant said to him, "Your brother is here. Your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has been come back safe and sound." Then he became angry and didn't want to go in. So his father came out and began to plead with him. He replied, "Look, I've been slaving many years for you. I've never disobeyed. And yet you never even gave me a goat to celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your assets with fruitless living. And you slaughtered the fattened calf for him?" The father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So guys, we're kind of talking tonight about this story. Again, it's a powerful one that Jesus gives us as an example of God's love. You guys have been in this series called Manifest, taking the attributes of God and figuring out how to magnify them in ourselves, make them reflected in our own lives, and how to be like Jesus through just that, being like Jesus. Taking what he is and making it who we are. And as we walk through this series, we've come to this last one, maybe the most important one, certainly one of the most popular ones that we look at when we think of who God is, and it's the love of God. Who is God in terms of love? Now, love is a lot of things, from messy to exciting to difficult to inspiring. And the love of God is really unique because the love of God reconciles us to him. More than that, it reconciles us to each other as well. And so if we're to find this reconciling love and magnify it in ourselves, I think one thing is really important, and this is kind of the point I want to get to tonight. And that's this. You can't magnify the love of God. You can't manifest the love of God unless you know the love of God. Okay, you can't show God's love unless you know God's love. And to truly know God's love, to access it, to be encapsulated by it, to be taken over by it enough to show it, we have to let it do its thing. We have to get out of its way and actually experience it. Because here's the thing about love, again, it's messy, especially the love of God. It overwhelms, it overcomes, and it doesn't play by the rules. Think about love that's in our own human lives. It's scary, maybe. It's exciting, but also it's vulnerable. To be in love, to encounter love and to show it, it can take us by surprise. And here's this thing about humans that we often do that's really frustrating. Scared to accept it, we put up a wall around it, right? We draw lines. We have boundaries. We can love this far, but stay over there. Don't cross this line. Oh, you can do this, and that's acceptable, but once we start getting uncomfortable, we have to put up our own walls and our own barriers. And I think that's kind of what this story does for us. It shows us what it means to put up the walls around the love of God. So if God's love isn't going to play by those rules, how do we experience it? How do we manifest it? We can't show what we or become what we haven't experienced for ourselves. And so I think we have a great opportunity here to look in this story and figure that out. So again, this story is really about identity, isn't it? It's about trying to see what is the hindrance between these sons and their father. And a lot of that is what they think of themselves and what they think of him. Who is the father? I think this question is asked of the sons. Who do you think you are? Who are they in the eyes of their father? Who are they to to this person that is supposed to love them and that they're supposed to love? Who do you think you are? I think this story asks the same question of us as well. So, if God is represented in the Father in this story, we have a great idea of who God is and what he thinks of us. So again, we have these two sons, and one son asks of the Father, hey, essentially, give me my inheritance now. Let's not pass over that quick fact, and let's examine what it is. Essentially, what he's saying is, hey, Dad, I wish you were dead. That's a next level of disrespect. That's not talking back anymore. That's breaking some rules. And so he's saying, Dad, it would be better for me if you were dead. Give me the money, and you know what? I'll be on my way. You never hear from me again. The dad, obviously heartbroken, gives him this, right? So this son goes off and parties, wastes his money, does whatever he wants, right? He just got all the money he could ever ask for, and he squanders it, throwing it away. We'll see he goes to this other country, and a famine hits. And this famine completely bankrupts him. He's wasted all of his money, and now he's poor, he's destitute, he's starving, and he's looking for work. He finds someone just to send him out into a field, but they won't give him any food. So he's sitting there in the dirt, disgusting mud, just working with pigs, right? And he looks at what the pigs are eating, and he's like, man, that looks really good at this point. And he's sitting there starving at rock bottom, and then he thinks, man, my dad has servants that do better than this. He starts kind of concocting this thing in his head, right? Maybe I can go home. I can't go home, not after that last conversation. Maybe I can work. Yeah, no, he's not going to take me back as a son, but maybe he'll just hire me at the very least. Certainly I'm not lovable, but maybe I'm hireable, right? Maybe I can work this off. All I want is some food, right? So he starts making this comeback speech in his head. All right, God, Father, I've sinned against you, and I've sinned against everybody. Yeah, my fault, my bad. Listen, I don't want to come back. If you would just let me work. Yeah, perfect. Just if you would let me be like one of your servants, we don't have to talk. Just let me be inside. I'll do work for you, and you feed me, and that's it. So he rehearses this kind of speech in his head. He's like, all right, I think I can come back. So he gets up, brushes himself off of the mud, and makes his way back home. He has no idea the way his father sees him. As little does he know, the father, since he's been gone, has been sitting up on the wall day and night, waiting for him, looking on the horizon, hoping his son comes home. All of a sudden, the sun crests over this hill, and the father looks up and sees it. And this is something that's interesting in this story. This is something that the people that Jesus is talking to would be gasping at as this happens. Because what happens is, not only does the father become filled with compassion for this person, this son that disrespected him, no, he's elated. He's overcome with emotion, and he runs. Maybe you've heard this before, maybe not, but in Jewish culture, a man does not run. They're especially head of a household. They're proud. They're supposed to be reserved, calmed. Nothing's going to make me run. I walk slowly with intention, right? Nothing's going to excite me to the point where I need to sprint, right? But here's this thing. There's so much emotion built up, so much love for his son that he takes off after him. And he comes sprinting away. Now, here's the thing. In this culture, again, dad doesn't run. So if you're the son, remember the last time you talked to dad. It didn't go well. Wasn't nice. And now you see dad sprinting after you. He's probably thinking, oh, it's game time. Like this, at best, ends with a fight. At worst, one of us doesn't walk away from this. He's probably really angry. And so he's probably gearing up this speech, and just, it's like, if I can get it out before he swings first, maybe this shot, this doesn't end in the fight. So the father is sprinting after him, and he's getting closer and closer, and the son in his mind is like, okay, I've sinned against you, and in the sight of everyone, I'm not worthy. I've sinned against you, and he's practicing in his head, and as this father gets closer and closer, he starts spewing it out, right? Father, I've sinned against you, and as this happens, the father runs up and just wraps him up in a hug. The son's pretty confused right now. Think about how awkward that had to be. Hey, question. Who here would consider themselves like a hugger? A few folks, okay? Introverts, look at these people, stay away from them. Here's bad news. I'm one of them too. Yeah, no, big hugger, love it. Who here is not a hugger? Not just indifferent, like, hey, don't touch me. Okay, cool, great. Yeah, respect, understand. See, I'm a big hugger, and no one else in my family is, so I learned very quickly what it is to not hug someone that doesn't want to be hugged. Have y'all seen this happen before? You know how awkward it is when a hugger hugs a non-hugger? Like, it kills the atmosphere of the room, right? Everything goes quiet, and just like as this person implodes on themselves, it's awful. Think about how awkward this hug has to be, right? The father wraps up his son, who he hasn't seen forever, and the son sitting here is like, God, Dad, just no, listen, I'm not worthy. No, I understand, just hire me, like I'm not your son. And there's this awkward embrace as the father is hugging him and kissing him and telling him, it's all right. And guys, I wonder how often we do that with God as our Father. How awkward are those hugs for us? Those embraces. You see, I think we do this quite often with God. We have our list of self-help, betterment, to-do lists when we mess up. We start writing our comeback speech to the Lord, and then all of a sudden, God comes and he completely ignores it. We sit there and he's trying to embrace us, and we just kind of maneuver around and we're like, no, God, I'll change, I'll do something different. And he knows full well that that's not necessary. And yet we do it anyway. You see, the Son has drawn a line in the sand. He's drawn a line around the love of the Father, and he says, he can't love me past this. There's no way he'll accept me. Not after what I've done, not after who I am, not after how I disrespected him and disregarded and threw out his love. There's no way I'll be a son again. And yet, the Father has no interest in hearing his speech. And so what he says is, no, get a ring, get a robe, get some new shoes on him. You know what? We'll get the calf. We're having steak tonight. You know what? Actually, gather all the troops. Yeah, bring the whole family around. Play some music because we're having a party. Because he's back. How uncomfortable is that for us? Especially those of us that feel like we have to earn everything that comes our way that's good. We have to earn our keep. We have to earn being loved at some point. I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know how that interacts with you and maybe your home life, your friends. But I think for a lot of us, it's uncomfortable. We feel so unworthy, and we feel like we've got so much to prove. And yet here's the thing. We never earned being a son or daughter to begin with. And we strive and we try and work our way back up into this standing of son or daughter when that's not how that works. No child is born, and then you'll get your last name in 7, 8, 9, 20 years when you've earned that last name. No, it's just given. And yet we think that we can earn something that we never lost and didn't earn to begin with. There's this invitation again in here, and it sounds like an invitation, I think, this time to this son of saying, who do you think you are? Who do you see yourself as that you're so broken and far away from me? Do you not see yourself as my son, my daughter? Who do you think you are that you think that you're unlovable? Maybe the Father asks, who do you think I am that I wouldn't love you or bring you back? So here's this thing, we have this really awkward kind of interaction, this awkward hug from the younger brother, and he has no idea what to do. He's just kind of going along with it, and he's probably in shock and doesn't know how to react to everything that's happening, and they send him in, and then there's this second brother to deal with, this older one. See, he's been working in the field, and while the younger brother took off and did whatever he wanted to, he's been working the entire time. He's respected his father. He did all the right things. He's been obedient, and he's been working, seems hard. And yet it sounds like he doesn't understand the love of the Father either. See, he comes home and he's really jealous. He asks the servant, the servant's like, your brother's home. And he's like, what? Maybe surprised he's alive, but certainly confused as to why this means as a party. And he talks to dad and he's like, hey, I've been here the entire time and you didn't give me a goat, and yet they're eating filet mignon. It's funny, he also uses the language, this son of yours. Not my brother. He says, this son of yours. He cuts ties here and says, he wasted all of your money, and yet you throw him a party. He's bitter. He's angry. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't understand the grace that's being shown him. And we've been there before, right? Maybe you have a sibling or something and you got punished for it, especially if you're the oldest. I understand this very well, where you get punished really hard for breaking some rules, and yet the younger sibling comes along and does whatever they want. They could look at your parents and just like drop a vase and say, what are you doing about it? And they'd say, oh, nothing, sweetheart, and walk the other way and yell at you for something. You'd get so angry. And yet here's the thing about those moments. If I'm honest with myself, when I was angry, it was never really about them. It was more about me, right? I wasn't saying, look what they did. Most of the time, if we got down to it, I was really saying, but look what I did. I obeyed. But I was good. What, don't I deserve something? Don't I deserve to be loved? I should get what I want. I did the right thing. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the time, a lack of grace is more of a heart issue instead of loving something that's just, right? Our lack of wanting to extend grace and mercy has nothing to do with who we are or who someone else is. It has everything to do with what we want and a selfishness, right? And there's this anger and frustration. And here's the thing, this brother draws a line too. And he says, no, you can't love him because it's not earned. He draws a line in front of the love of the Father and says, it can't pass here unless someone earns it. You see, the son that left, he wasted the love of the Father. The older brother cheapened it. The older brother looks at his father and says, this should be able to be bought. I've done enough to buy your love, right? I should be the favorite. I think we do that kind of often too. Maybe we cheapen the love of the Father, cheapen God's love towards us. How invaluable is a love that could never be earned? Think of that. And how worthless is a love that could be bought with some household chores? Thinking of God's love for us, how invaluable is a love that chases after us in Jesus, that could never be bought, that is freely given to you, but could never be deserved, and yet how worthless is a love that could be bought with some quiet times and some good church attendance. It sounds fragile. But God doesn't want us to barter for our love because that's not how his love works. Yes, we do better. Yes, we try and grow and mature and we do the right things, absolutely. But that obedience comes from love, not for love. We don't chase after it. It's given to us. It overwhelms us, and we act from it, right? And yet, here's the thing. We look at other people with judgment because they didn't do enough, maybe, right? We have this frustration when we see God's love extending beyond these borders and going past this line, right? And I think it says a lot about us when we think our salvation is likely, but we look at somebody else's and say, oh, wow, that can't happen. When we look at someone else's salvation and we say, I don't see how they could be a believer, but we think we deserve it. Oh, I'm a Christian. That makes sense. We should realize that it doesn't make sense for any of us, and we were all just as far off and brought close. I think there's conviction in the tone for this question, where the Father would ask, who do you think you are? Were you not just as undeserving of my love, but haven't I given it to you? Shouldn't we rejoice over the other brothers? Finally, there's one more son, I think, in this scenario. He's problematic. And he's not in the text. There's kind of an assumption here. See, why is this text important? Why is it useful to us? Why is it a story that needs to be said? Because often it doesn't go this long. Often it's a son saying, hey, I'm done, give me my money, I'm out. And then he stays gone. Maybe he's too ashamed to come back. Maybe he just doesn't want to. Maybe he's avoiding it. Maybe there's all sorts of heart issues that get in the way. So we have two sons, but maybe there's a third one here that we can identify with. And that's the son that doesn't come home. It doesn't want to come home. It's scared to come home, that feels like they can't come home. Maybe that's something that you feel like tonight. The lines have been drawn where you say, God, he could not love me after this, not after who I am, what I've done, and any other thing. And here's the thing, we think we're too far away, and not that God's going to run after us. We think we're too far gone and too far broken, and we're too ashamed, and we don't think that God's going to heal us and give us a robe and a new identity. The truth is, in Jesus, he came and died for us. That is God running after us, right? That is God chasing after us and sprinting forward to say, hey, I'm here. And Jesus dies for our sins because of the love of God. Because we're not too far gone or too far broken. And no matter where we would go or what we have done, God's going to continue chasing after us. He is the Father watching the horizon, asking for you to come home. So if you find yourself in any of those positions, I have some freeing news and something convicting to say. God has no interest in the lines that you have drawn around his love. Whether you draw them around yourself or around somebody else. Whether it's in fear of yourself or judgment over somebody else. It's not useful, it's not helpful for him. It's not helpful for us. And all it does is prevent us from showing the love of God to others and embracing it for ourselves. So again, I ask the question, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are when you think of how God views you, and how do you view yourself? The questions I would ask us tonight as we wrap up are these three things. That first one, who do you think you are? And who do you think God says that you are? The second one is this, who of the three sons do you relate to? Who of the three sons do you see as an embodiment of how you react to God's love? When you feel it, are you wrapped up in a hug and it's uncomfortable? Is there judgment that comes after? Are you saying that you have to earn it? Or do you think that you're not worth even running home to and being chased down? Last one is this, what lines or barriers have you drawn around God's love in your life? What are the parts where you have said, God's love is great, but don't come here. Don't touch that part. Maybe don't send me here. Don't ask me to love this person. I can't do that. God, don't make me reconcile this. Don't touch this hurt. Don't make me dig up that pain into my past. So again, the goal when we look at these stories is to see what God's trying to say to us and what we're going to do about it. So we're going to take a couple moments here and just try and hear the word of God, hear the Holy Spirit speaking to us. If something that I've already said tonight has provoked something, keep having that conversation. But again, now ask yourself those questions and know that your Father wants to talk to you. He wants you to come home. And he's ready to extend that love to you. Guys, what it would look like. What would it look like if we would let the love of God in? We would see it as an ocean to be immersed in instead of a river to be managed and led along. Putting up bridges and barriers and dams and all sorts of things in the way to kind of manage where it goes and force it to stay where we want it to be. Just take a deep breath, clear our minds and our hearts. and listening to what the Father would have to say for us tonight.